Mullins and Hold Me Jesus, from a liturgy, a legacy, and a ragamuffin band. This is Music and More from Compassion International featuring Rich Mullins with your host, John Rivers. Since early in his career, Rich has been interested in reaching out to others, not just through his music, but in tangible, hands-on ways.
It's interesting because after my second album, I was so disillusioned with Christian music and with my own role in it that I just really kind of went, wow, I really wanted to say something that was real and that was authentic. And what I'm finding out about myself is that I'm trying to say things that are cute, and I'm trying to win an audience to me rather than point an audience to Christ. And having become concerned about that, I realized, man, I really need to refocus, which I think the story of my life is the story of refocusing. It's the story of setting down on a great road, on a great path, and then all of a sudden realizing, wow, I've really swayed, so I need to stop everything. I need to look at where I'm going again and then get there. So that summer I got the opportunity to go to the Orient. It was the year that the Olympics were in Seoul, and there was a seminary in Korea that was really anxious to get their students really good at speaking conversational English. And so part of their plot and plan was to have some American come over and just hang out with students. So I got to go to Korea and hang out for a month, just talking with students. And then after I did that, went to Japan, got to visit an old friend of mine there and do some concerts, which was very, very interesting. Then we went to Thailand, which was really, of everything that happened on that particular trip, Thailand had probably the greatest impact on me. When we got to Thailand, we went up in the Golden Triangle. We were in the Wing Hang Valley, north of Chiang Mai. We were right by the Burma border. And all of a sudden, seeing the impact of Christianity on a Buddhist culture, and seeing the impact not only of Christianity as a theology, as a theological position, or Christianity as a moral code, or Christianity as a political idea, or as a philosophy, but seeing the impact of people who really have the love of Christ and who respond to the call of Christ to forget themselves and to go out and love other people was one of the most impactful things that happened. At the time, we were getting ready to leave, and we had been in a Chinese refugee camp, and I had played the dulcimer for them and all that sort of thing, and they were so fascinated by that. And it was wonderful playing for the Chinese refugees because of all the people I've ever played for. When I started playing the dulcimer, rather than sit there and listen, they all got up and they would touch it, and they would, while I'm playing, it was wonderful. They were so curious. They were so interested in what was going on. And as we were getting on the train to leave to go back to Bangkok, and this man came running up to my window and said, you must come back. You have to come back. I said, why? And he said, because you have to be a teacher. You must be a teacher. And I said, well, what do I need to do in order to do that? And he said, well, all you need is a degree from an American university. Well, I'm going for a degree from an American university now. I don't know that I will go back to Thailand, but what I figured out from that was that you can sing all you want. And I started looking at my own life about that time too and going, wow, who has had the most impact on me? Was it all the musicians that I listened to growing up? And I listened to music growing up. I was real into pop music, the whole bit. And I thought, was it those guys? Was it books that I had read? I know one book I read, the pastor at our church gave me a copy of Mere Christianity my senior year, and that had a big impact on me. But the most profound impact that I ever felt was that came from people who just simply loved me and were really willing to spend time with me. And everything else is kind of icing on the cake. So I realized at that time, boy, a music career could be a fun thing. It hasn't been so far. This was several years ago. And I really need to switch careers. So we came back, and I was due to go in the studio and figured, boy, this is going to be my last album, so I'm not going to be clever here. I'm just going to say what I have to say because I won't get another opportunity to say this. Because I had sold so few albums, you know, you have to sell or nobody's going to sign you. And that was the album that had If I Stand on it, Awesome God was on it, The Other Side of the World was on it. I just picked, of the songs that I had written, the 10 songs that spoke the clearest to me, and put them on. And the irony of the whole thing is that was the first album that people started buying.
Wow. And I, for one, am glad that Rich took those trips, came to that place, and continued recording. I asked Rich about his first trip overseas to view firsthand the work of Compassion International.
Well, throughout all this, I've been a Compassion sponsor, and doing a presentation of my concerts, just recognizing, you know, everyone can't go to Thailand, everyone can't go to Peru, everyone can't go all over the world, but we can still have that impact. And once again, I think it's a matter of what you say to a kid when you sponsor them is, man, somebody really does love you. Somebody really has heard your mother's prayers and really is answering. And you make them able to believe that there is a good God. And I think that's a very, very important thing. Compassion, the whole time I've been doing that, going, yeah, that's nice, isn't it? You know, but still I want to do a little bit more. Well, I went on a trip with Compassion. And I'll tell you, the honest truth is I had been, I think, as far as thinking-wise, I had been behind Compassion the whole way, going, yeah, this is great. What a great idea. What a great way to operate. I appreciated a lot about the organization. But when I got to Guatemala and actually met kids who had letters from their sponsors put in little boxes that were almost like shrines, that these kids had memorized the letters, and they would give you the letter and then they would quote it word for word what was said. When I talked to a mother of about 3 kids that are Compassion-sponsored kids, I found out about how one of her children was stolen from her, and how excited she is that her children are getting an education and they might be able to do something besides live in front of a cement wall and make tortillas from about 3 in the morning until about 9 in the evening. When I saw what the impact that Compassion had on her, not even the kids who were being sponsored, but even on the people around them. When I talked to people who were not even yet Compassion sponsored children, but who were aware that there were people that had resources that were responding to the needs of those people there, all of a sudden I went, wow, suddenly it switched from going, yeah, this is a great idea, to suddenly it switched to being kind of a passion of mine, just kind of going, I wish there was no one in the world who did not know that God loved them. And I can't talk to everybody, but I can take this little bit of money, like $24 a month, and where that $24 a month may not mean the world to me, it might mean I have to give up, you know, an evening at the movies, or I might have to give up a chewing gum habit or whatever. That doesn't compare to the joy that I have from knowing, boy, this little bit of money has impacted not only the life of the child who is directly receiving the sponsorship, but it has impacted the lives of the people around them. All of a sudden people are going, wow, what is this? And plainly what it is Christianity. This is the God of Jesus Christ reaching out to people who are in terrible need through his body here on earth, which is the church.
Hi, this is Jim Beeler, inviting you to one very special remote broadcast
this afternoon from 1 to 3.
I think my favorite song from Rich's compact disc, A Liturgy, A Legacy, and a Ragamuffin Band, is Here in America. And I talked to Rich about the song.
Well, I wrote that probably around 1976 or so. I was hitchhiking, and I normally don't write a song in one sitting. It normally is kind of accumulates over a period of time, like I'll write a line or two, or I'll write a song and throw the song away, except I will find 2 or 3 lines that I really like, and I'll save those lines. It was just, I think it was after having been eaten by red ants and sleeping in a culvert that I really realized what a cool country this really was. It just kind of went, everywhere you go, it's different. And everywhere you go, it's hard. I mean, you come to the Midwest, you know, you watch those you read those old John Steinbeck novels about, you know, the Dust Bowl, and, you know, we have a history of 200 years of desperation, of people hanging on for dear life, hanging on because they believe there's got to be something better than this. And I don't think people would have left Europe and the other places that they left to come to America if there weren't some pretty bad situations over there. And so I think one of the things that was compelling about when I was in you know, back in the 70s, I grew up in a fairly privileged home. I mean, I guess we were probably poor by most people's standards, but I did have a father and I had a mother who both still lived with us. I had a great extended family. I had grandparents, great-grandparents, uncles, aunts, out, you know, just everywhere. We had some real values, and we were never so poor that we didn't eat. You know, it wasn't like that. And I think there was something real compelling. And I had just finished some Steinbeck novel. It was the first time I took off on a hitchhiking venture that just went to nowhere, just kind of going, I just kind of want to see the country, and I kind of want to see it the way John Steinbeck would have seen it, because I was a big fan of his at the time. It just hit me that way. And I think at the time, it was also in a real desolate stretch of road where there was absolutely nobody around. And I tend to like people, and I tend to want people around me. And in that real aloneness, the realization that God was there, that was very comforting. So I was kind of going, wow, this is great.
Saints and children, we have gathered here to hear the sacred story, and I'm glad to bring it to you.
Rich Mullins, Here in America, from his album, A Liturgy, a Legacy, and a Ragamuffin Band. You're listening to Compassion International's Music and More with Rich Mullins. I'm John Rivers. I asked Rich about another song from his new project, Hard.
That was kind of my voter anger song. It didn't come out very angry on the tape, but it's a little more tongue-in-cheek look at the same thing. Just kind of acknowledging. See, I think there's a big problem in the church. I think that everyone thinks that if you have struggles in your life, it's because you're not really filled with the Holy Spirit, or you're not really reading your Bible daily, or you're doing something wrong. I think life by nature is a struggle. And I you know, whether or not you believe in the health, wealth, and prosperity doctrine, the ideas of that have kind of polluted almost all of our thinking about Christianity, where we think that a really great Christian is that Christian who does not struggle with temptation, is that Christian who can't wait to get up in the morning and spend 4 hours praying and reading out of the book of Leviticus. We think, boy, that's what a really mature Christian looks like. Well, I'm looking at Paul kind of going, boy, here's a man who obviously was filled with the Spirit, a man who obviously had studied the Scriptures. Here's a man who had had an authentic encounter with the living Christ. And he prays to God and says, Lord, I begged you to take this thorn from my flesh, which we don't know what that means. And you can guess anything you want to guess. I don't think it matters, or we would have been told. Lord, I've been praying for you to take away this infirmity of mine. And you haven't. And God looks down at him and doesn't go, yeah, it's because you're so spiritually immature. God didn't look down at him and say, well, it's because you don't have enough faith. God didn't look down from heaven at Paul and say, well, you know, if you would just get up earlier and pray a couple more hours in the morning, or if you would just memorize another 10 Psalms. He didn't say any of that. He merely said to Paul, hey, my grace is plenty. My grace is sufficient. And so I think many times we're afraid to drop our guard because we're afraid that people will think that we're spiritually flakes. Well, the truth is we are, and so are they, and we're all trying to fake each other out. And the song, It's Hard to Be Like Jesus, is kind of like looking at yourself and going, whew, what a relief. I don't have to fake it anymore. I can admit that I don't always feel like not honking at the person who has stopped in front of me on the, and won't go through the green light. I don't have to pretend like it's not hard for me to make the best choices that I can make. The honest truth is it is hard, and it will probably remain that way for a good long time. Not that there's no joy in the Christian life. And I think part of the joke of this song is the his eyes on the sparrow and the lilies of the field I've heard, and he will watch over you and he will watch over me so we can dress like flowers and eat like birds. I deliberately wrote that because I think what the gospel of Christ does is it challenges us at every level.
Well, I am a good Midwestern boy, giving honest day's work if I can get it.
Rich Mullins.
One of the reasons I love compassion is because it does give the average person, I think we all feel frustrated. And what compassion does is it offers you the opportunity to have a positive impact. It gives you an opportunity to do something that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. There are a lot of reasons I like compassion. One is because they work with the local churches in the areas where they go, with works that are already there, helping to support. There are tons of people who are already out there doing the work. It's just that there's not enough resources for them to really be able to dig in and do the work really well. And what compassion does is it allows me to facilitate this work that is already going on. It involves indigenous people, which I really like the idea of people helping themselves and me facilitating that. I like the idea that compassion does have some criteria for who they plug into and who they don't. That they do have a commitment not only to the local church and to local works that are already ongoing, but they also have a commitment to biblical integrity of the people that they're working with, that sort of thing. So I kind of go, as a strong believer in the autonomy of the church, and as a strong believer that the actual work of redemption, the work that Christ came to do and that the church as his body on earth continues to do, I believe that happens through the church. And I think a lot of times, in that we're Americans and we tend to have this mentality that says we need people specialized in special fields and let's depend on the specialists. Compassion somewhat flies in the face of that and says, no, let's support the organism of the church. It doesn't replace the church, which is one of the things that I really like about it. It doesn't replace it, it sort of undergirds it and gives me the opportunity to participate in a field far away from where I live.
I believe in God the Father, Almighty Maker of heaven and Maker of earth.
If I'm going to err, I would rather err in favor of compassion than in favor of cynicism. If I'm going to waste one thing or another, I would rather lose $24 a month than lose my ability to believe that people can be honest and that work can be done and that lives can be changed. I would rather not have that $24 and still have a faith than otherwise. And I think the Compassion gave me, before I started sponsoring a child, I asked them to see a financial report. Compassion was very open with me. They were, responded very quickly. And there is still an element of faith involved in it. You kind of have to go, I can't guarantee that every penny that was ever given the church or ever given a charity organization, certainly that was ever given to a government, was properly spent. But I can tell you one thing, if the government of the United States was run as efficiently as Compassion International is run, we wouldn't have the debt that we have. I'm convinced of that. And I think that they are very respectful of the money that comes in. I find the story of the Good Samaritan fascinating for that very reason. That I think, however the story would have ended up, Christ went to the trouble to describe three people who passed up the man who was hurt. There were three people that passed him up, And Christ didn't say, this guy had merely been passed by a lot of people, but he described the people. And the Good Samaritan did the right thing. You know what we don't know is what happened to that man when he came around. We don't know if suddenly he decided to love Samaritans. We don't know if he accepted Christ as his personal Savior. We don't know if he learned to read. We don't know what happened as a result of the Samaritan's good action. All we know is that there was a man who saw another man who might have been his enemy in terrible need, and he responded positively. I think someday there will be a judgment, and I'm not trying to say that we can earn our way into heaven. I'm not saying that we can earn what Christ has freely given us. But when we identify with Christ, when we take on the name of Christ, when we become a Christian, I think that that means that our lives should be infused with the character of Christ. And the character of Christ is that of a wildly, ridiculously generous and compassionate man who says, I will love you regardless of your response. I will love you. I will continue to hold my hand out to you regardless of whether or not you grab it. And so I think as a Christian, in my own fight against cynicism, what I have, the story of the Good Samaritan has become more meaningful to me, not because of what I know about the Good Samaritan, but because of what I don't know about the man who was the recipient of his generosity. It says to me, there is something in the character of Christ, which I, as a Christian, he empowers me to love that way. Christ empowers us, the Spirit empowers us. Compassion merely gives us an opportunity to act on that empowerment. But it is the love of Christ that that makes the difference. And if a difference is going to be made, I don't know that there's 100% success, but I know that when we act generously, when we behave in a compassionate way, I know that God looks down and goes, wow, people are still capable of faith. People are still capable of love. I'm so glad. I'm not always glad about what I've made here, but you've made me glad. If we want to bless the Lord, this is the way to do it. He doesn't need our applause. What he, I think, must feel blessed from is when we actually participate in his nature. And so the opportunities that these kids will be given as a result of having an education, as a result of being able to read and being able to eat even, how do you measure that? How do you weigh that? What kind of value do you put on that? And I kind of go, for $24 a month, boy, that doesn't put a lot of value on it. That's the best bargain in the world that I know of, except for salvation, which doesn't cost us a penny.